Obviously, you didn't have Neil Armstrong around to be able to ask questions with, but hypothetically, if you could sit in a theater with him, watch First Man, and when it's over, lean over and go, what did you think of this part? What is the aspect of the movie that you would most want to ask him about?
He'd give some amazing responses, I think.
I'd ask him if he'd like to recast me. And then I'd do everything in my power to make whoever he wanted.
I'd just sit at the back of the theatre and see if he didn't just walk out.
Just judging every reaction.
I think that was the amazing thing about Neil, that he would be able to come up with something that was so poignant and particular and funny and unique that I just wait for him to say it.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what he would think of all of this.
Well, he was certainly somebody, and Janet as well, that avoided the spotlight. So, you know, very consistently deflected any attention paid to him onto, you know, whatever the larger context was. And, you know, it's a very special quality of his.
For sure. So, Ryan, obviously when you play a real person, you still get to sort of deliver the lines how you see fit, and you can still sort of interpret the character how you see fit. But there's one line of the movie that everyone's talking about, one small step, that I feel like there's less freedom to play around with. What's the difference in how you approach that line versus every other line in the script?
Well, that line was different just in the sense that, you know, I was also, because the timing was important, because we wanted it, even though it doesn't play in the film all in one shot, we initially wanted it to be able to, if Damien wanted to use it that way in the edit. So I was listening to the recordings of the actual, you know, the actual recordings. So it had to fit into the timeline and structure of the actual event.
For sure. You know, one of the most fascinating things about this movie is that it takes an event that I thought I knew pretty well, I was educated about growing up, and because I'm able to learn more about Neil Armstrong's personal life and Janet's personal life, I look at his achievements differently. I have a new perspective. I'm not a gossip reporter, I don't ask people personal questions, but if I hypothetically were to know you guys, if I were to know about your personal lives, would I look at you, do you think I would look at your achievements and your career and your filmography differently?
Wow, it's deep. Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing, is whenever you kind of are removed from anything or make anything removed, it makes it easier to not see that that person's a human being. So that's what the film does really well, I think, is remind everybody that there was just, you know, a few men who did this amazing thing.
Sure. Mr. Gosling?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's what I was inspired by Damien's instinct to just focus on Neil and Janet and this and their family, you know, that once you understand sort of what they were experiencing, you know, the extraordinary amount of sacrifice involved to them personally, and the amount of loss that they had experienced before and during these missions, it puts everything into a completely different perspective. And in this case, it makes their experiences, this achievement, even more extraordinary.
For sure. And as we wrap up, so much of this movie is about failing over and over again so that you can learn from it and then finally achieve and succeed things. What's the most valuable failure you've ever had in your career that you've learned from?
Every day I go to work is embarrassing and full of failure. Yeah, it's a very lucky thing actually to do for a living, because it's hard to get complacent and become jaded, I think. You're constantly failing. Well, I am anyway.
No, I think that's there's not one specific one that I could choose. It's just, I agree with Claire that it's a part of the job, and oftentimes that's when the most truthful things come out, is amidst that, and so you have to sort of be willing to do that.
Damien, good to see you, man. Nice to finally meet you.
Oh yeah, you too, man.
So much of this movie is about failing over and over and over again so that you can learn from it and then go on to succeed. You have achieved so much in your career. What is the failure in your life, in your career, that you most learned from?
Oh wow. Well, you know, I mean, there are quite a few. I remember just, you know, first moving out to LA, thinking that, oh, you know, this is great. I'm just gonna, you know, like everyone moving to LA, I was full of hope and you know, felt like opportunities were there and I was gonna get movies made. And then, you know, fast forward to, you know, almost 10 years of just, you know, one no after another after another. I mean, I still look back and can recognize that I was incredibly lucky. Luck does play a huge role in all of this, but you have to learn, I think, to take the no's in stride and always listen to that piece of advice that you can hear 1,000 no's, but all it takes is one yes. And that's sort of how it went for me, especially getting my first projects off the ground, Whiplash and La La Land.
And now you're sitting in the shadow of NASA. I agree, luck can take you so far, but talent has got to take you the rest of the way.
Maybe, but certainly this is a piece of luck. I mean, we were lucky enough to actually get to shoot here also for part of the movie, and just I mean, NASA just opened their doors to us, so that was, you know, that's a whole other story. But we were certainly privileged in that regard.
For sure. I would imagine you're sick of hearing the words "flag controversy" by this point. So excuse me for asking this question, but the reason I want to ask it is because I was getting frustrated when people would ask me, and I would say, "But you haven't seen the movie yet, so you don't really know what you're talking about." As a director, how do you combat people who have made up their mind about something when they haven't even seen your movie? Because I would argue this is one of the most patriotic movies I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, certainly the intention here was to make a deeply patriotic movie. I do believe it's a deeply patriotic movie. I mean, we're trying to pay tribute to incredible heroes in our history who sacrificed everything. And we all know about the moon landing, but I don't think we really know how much sacrifice went into it, how much loss went into it, how much, as you say, failure made the success possible, you know? I think that's actually been taken for granted. So certainly I you know, encourage people to see the movie. But the intention on our part was absolutely to pay tribute to that enormous sacrifice that was done on our country's behalf.
Yeah, you know, I gotta say, I felt a little bit like an idiot last night because I'm sitting there watching this movie, like leaned forward, and there was a moment where I was like, "What is going to happen?" And then I thought, "What am I talking about? What is going to happen?" As a director, do you direct nonfiction almost as fiction? How do you make, as a storyteller, me forget that I know what the ending is?
Well, I mean, that's the challenge right there in a nutshell. Is you know, you take a story like the moon landing. It is the most famous outcome in history. You know, that they walk on the moon and safely return home. But what I found when I started doing research on this was it was the ironic thing of the more I learned how they did it, the more astonished I was that they did it. The more I learned how finicky and fragile these capsules were, the more I learned how much they didn't know, how much they were making up as they went along, the risks, the warning signs, the deaths that sort of paved the road to that success. I guess I had a hope that if we told that story accurately, if we did justice to that story, that audiences would almost forget as they were watching that this had actually turned out well, and be, you know, having their hearts in their throat during those final climactic moments.
For sure. My producers hate me because whenever we can't pull off a live shot, I'll lean over and I'll go, "You know, we went live from the moon in the '60s," and they just sort of glare at me. So I'm gonna remind them of this.
I did use the, if we can put someone on the moon, we can on set.
Did everyone groan and just roll their eyes?
For sure.